one of the things that's really interesting is looking at the benches, because the bench can become very vital. It's always vital, and when anything's vital, it's that tenfold in the playoffs. And Golden State's bench, it's fair to say, is ascending at the right time. They have GP2 back, with Wiggins coming back. If Wiggins starts, you got DiVincenzo now off the bench. Um, you got Jonathan Kuminga, who's one of the few kind of young guys that's really kind of taken on a legitimate nightly role. And then, of course, they have Jordan Poole, who is always a threat to be a scorer. Or he can end up like he was it on Friday night. He went like 0 for 9.
Yeah, he was awful.
And then you also can throw in like they have like Anthony Lamb. I don't think you're going to see a lot of Anthony Lamb in this series. JaMychal Green really has fallen out of the rotation, but I think in terms of disrupting Sabonis, getting length out there, I think you'll see JaMychal Green for a few minutes at some point, like maybe after a game or two. You might start seeing him, or maybe even game one, seeing him a little bit, because I just feel like getting that extra length and that defense out there to try and disrupt Sabonis, I think that could be really helpful. So I think he can be kind of a wild card for the Warriors, and that's coming from a perspective of a guy that's been covering the Kings all season. And then I think always a wild card for the Warriors bench is the other lottery pick that they have, which is Moses Moody, who is always a threat to score like 15 or 20 off the bench, even though he doesn't always get the opportunity, as I understand it. That is a bench that's kind of firing on all cylinders right now. And while I wouldn't say that the Kings bench is doing the opposite, and that's mainly because, Malik Monk after the All-Star break really got back into his zone, aside from like a down, like 1 or 2 down games, maybe the lower leg soreness, everything seems pretty tip top for him. Davion Mitchell has just blossomed over the last 2 months in terms of fitting into his role. I think you can. Well, I don't know if he's necessarily guaranteed a huge role in the playoffs. Kessler Edwards is kind of another guy that's ascended, but there's uncertainty as to who we'll see in like terms of like a big guy. Trey Lyles is kind of taken a step back in terms of scoring. I mean, outside shooting mainly, he's still providing a pretty solid impact on defense and always fighting on the glass. He's always down there boxing people out, getting his body on somebody. But especially given his pre-All-Star break play, he's slowed down a bit, and maybe that's just enough to really that fact that the Warriors really are firing on all cylinders, and the Kings are kind of, in terms of their bench, just kind of you almost want to slap a question mark on that too, because like if Monk and Davion are playing really well, then that could constitute a pretty good bench attack. But is it enough? Is it as expansive and airtight as the Warriors? I mean, just explaining it, like, it seems like everybody on the Warriors minus Anthony Lamb and their rookies can really make a difference. Are you worried about the bench differential, the bench matchup here?
I'm not personally. I think the Kings bench has, they're going to have their good games. They're going to have their bad games. I don't know. I just really trust in the Kings bench. I know Davion, he can be iffy on offense. I really trust Lyles. Maybe he isn't shooting the ball as well as he usually does right now, but man, I mean, Trey Lyles is arguably one of our better players off the bench. I mean, it's between him and Monk, right? But there's times where it's like, man, Lyles is better than Monk right now. The backup 5 is an interesting topic, of course, that we can probably get into in a second. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, it really just depends on if Monk shows up or not. I think Monk is a guy who will do well in the playoffs just because of his high energy kind of guy. And I don't know. He doesn't seem like a guy who's going to fall to the pressure. He seems like a guy who's just going to rise with it. I mean, I think he's the real wild card for this team and this bench. He's the big scorer off the bench. If he's not scoring, that's a huge scoring load that you're missing. And then, of course, you have the backup 5 position, which I'm okay with right now, but it will be between Metu and Len. And you wrote a good article yesterday morning on this. And is Len going to stay in here? He's been playing really well. Is he going to keep getting the minutes at the backup 5, or Are you going to see Metu? Because Metu will probably fit the small ball mold a little better against the Warriors. Or maybe we'll see Trey Lyles get moved to the 5 because, I mean, he could be played at the small ball 5, and maybe you throw Kessler Edwards at the 4 against their smaller 4, right? The Warriors' smaller 4. So just a lot of like question marks, I guess, at that backup 5. But I mean, it's not new, right?
Yeah.
So, but to answer your question, I'm not that worried about it. But if Monk gets off in game 1 and looks like garbage, I'd be like, okay. Like, this is, I mean, a lot of this is going to ride on Monk's ability to score.
First of all, I want to just note that since Trey Lyles' shoulder injury, he's shooting 27.9% from 3 in 12 games.
Jeez.
I agree with you that Malik Monk is a huge factor. He's probably the X factor. I mean, when he's playing well and balling, hitting threes, doing his facilitating, getting to the rim through that two-man game. Yeah, he's great. And the team's playing usually their best basketball. But again, I get down to like, think about the defenders that Golden State can stick on some of these guys and disrupt. And I don't know.
That's true. No, that's true.
I get very worried about the fact that it's like, if you just, even if you're hitting a bunch of threes, it just feels like you're getting into issues here where it's like whatever the Kings can offer, the Golden State's got a match for. I mean, like the one thing that they probably don't have a match for is like Davion's defense, because that's just going to be a huge impact no matter how you cut it. But it's just like that can't carry you the whole way. Bench scoring is going to have to be important, and I am concerned about the benches, and maybe more so just about the fact that it's like when you talk about the Warriors getting it clicking, and of course Wiggins is coming back to the lineup, so this kind of kneecaps my argument here. But because Wiggins is coming back, DiVincenzo goes back to that bench, and that just seems like that's the area where I'm talking about the whole team getting it firing on all cylinders. That part in particular seems like the one that's really just blasting off right now.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
It's just something to kind of consider. And again, I'd be interested to know if Warriors fans feel that way at all about using JaMychal Green a little bit, or if Moses Moody provides any kind of scoring punch. They probably would only use Moses Moody if they had some real issues with Poole, because I don't really know if you're talking about going like 5 or 11 guys deep at that point. And that's just not what anybody should be doing in the playoffs, let alone a team with as much experience as them. But he could be a scoring factor. It just seems like the Warriors have a little bit more ammunition there. You know what I mean? So
yeah. I mean, they might, and it could be a big factor for sure. But I don't think it's. I think the Kings have a good bench in their own right.
Yeah,
regardless, and yeah, they might match it, but I don't know. I see this series falling more on the starters and the bench.
Yeah,
that's
but Malik Monk does play into that massively.
Yeah,
kind of being the 5th best player, if you want to put it that way.